You know that feeling when your whole life suddenly stops making sense? When a single piece of paper changes everything you've ever believed? That's what happened to me the day I received a letter from my late father. He'd been gone for 5 years, yet somehow his words reached me from beyond the grave. Before I tell you what that letter said, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear will shake you just like it shook me. My name is Ethan Brooks, and until that day, I thought I had a perfectly ordinary life. I lived in a quiet town on the outskirts of Seattle, worked as a freelance graphic designer, and visited my mother every Sunday for lunch. My father, Richard Brooks, had passed away after a short illness when I was 25. His death was peaceful, they said. No drama, no mystery, just a quiet goodbye. At least, that's what I believed, until that envelope arrived. It was a gray, rainy morning, the kind that makes you want to stay in bed forever. I just made coffee when I heard the knock at the door. The mailman handed me a small, worn envelope with no return address. The handwriting looked old, shaky but familiar. My stomach tightened when I saw the name written on the front. To my son, Ethan. I froze. The handwriting. It was my father's. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at it. My father was meticulous. He used to sign everything with a neat loop under his name. This was exactly like that. But that couldn't be possible, right? He'd been dead for years. I finally sat down and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, slightly yellowed and creased. The smell of old ink hit me. I unfolded it carefully, and the first line made my heart pound. If you're reading this, Ethan, then something has gone very wrong, and you deserve to know the truth. I didn't know what that meant. I kept reading. Your mother and I made choices I deeply regret. There are things about our family that were kept from you, not to protect you, but to protect her. Her? My mother? My hand grew 8 senki. The letter went on to describe things that made no sense, references to a child, a lie, and the cabin by the lake. The words were cryptic, fragmented, almost as if he was writing in a hurry. I read it 3 times, trying to understand. Then I saw the last line. You'll find the answers in the old cabin, but be careful who you trust. That line, be careful who you trust, it echoed in my head for hours. I called my mom later that day. She sounded cheerful, like always. When I told her about the letter, the silence on the other end of the phone lasted too long. Finally, she said, Ethan, where did you get that letter? Her voice trembled slightly. I told her the truth, that it had come in the mail. She denied knowing anything about it, but I could tell she was hiding something. My mom had this small habit. Whenever she lied, she cleared her throat softly. She did it 3 times during that conversation. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words, the cabin by the lake, kept looping in my mind. That cabin had been in our family for years. It was my dad's getaway spot, a quiet place in the woods, 2 hours away. I hadn't been there since his funeral. By morning, I made up my mind. I packed a small bag, grabbed my camera, and got into my car. The drive was long and silent. The road wound through misty forests and quiet valleys. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked. Yet something about that silence felt wrong. When I reached the cabin, it was exactly how I remembered it, except older, gustier, more forgotten. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Everything smelled of old wood and damp air. I searched the place for anything that could explain the letter, but nothing stood out. Then I noticed something strange. Behind one of the paintings on the wall, the wood looked newer, like it had been replaced. I tapped it. Hollow.
I pulled at the edge of the panel until it came loose. Behind it was a small metal box, locked shut, and on top of it, a folded photograph. When I opened it, I felt my entire body go cold, because in that photo, my father was holding a baby, but that baby wasn't me. My hands went cold the moment I saw that photograph. It was old, the corners curled, the color faded like it had been hidden for decades. My father looked younger in it, maybe in his 30s. He was smiling, holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. But that baby, it wasn't me. I was certain of it. My baby pictures were all over my mom's house, and I didn't look anything like that. The baby in this photo had lighter hair, and there was a tiny birthmark near his temple, something I never had. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in my dad's handwriting, were the words, "For the day he learns the truth." My throat tightened. He learns the truth? Who was he? Me or the baby? And then there was the box, the small, rusted metal one hidden behind the wall. I grabbed it and tried to open it, but it was locked tight. There was no key in sight. I searched every corner of that cabin, drawers, cupboards, under floorboards. The more I looked, the more frustrated I became. It felt like my father had left breadcrumbs, but none of them made sense. Then I noticed the old clock on the fireplace mantel. It wasn't working anymore, but something about it caught my eye. The back panel was loose. When I pulled it open, a small brass key fell out. I don't know why, but my heart started pounding. I picked it up, hands trembling, and fitted into the box's lock. It turned with a sharp click. Inside, there were two things: another letter and a small envelope. The letter was longer this time, dated just 2 months before my father died. "Ethan, if you've come this far, then you've already seen the photograph. I wanted to tell you everything when I got sick, but your mother begged me not to. She said it would destroy you. Maybe she was right, but lies destroy in quieter ways." I stopped reading for a second, trying to steady my breathing. The air in that cabin suddenly felt heavier. "The baby in the photo is your brother." I froze. Brother? His name is Michael. He was born 3 years before you. Your mother and I adopted you after we lost him. But it's not that simple, Ethan. Michael didn't die, at least not the way she said he did. She told me he was gone, but I never saw him, and deep down, I never believed her. I had to sit down. My legs felt weak. I kept reading, my eyes darting over every line. My father's words were sharp, angry, desperate, like a man trying to confess before time ran out. The letter ended with one last sentence. "Ethan, the people we love most are sometimes the ones who betray us deepest. Don't hate her, but don't trust her either." When I finished reading, I just sat there staring at the paper. My father's voice echoed in my mind. I opened the small envelope inside the box. It contained a faded business card, Henry Collins, attorney at law, and a phone number written in the corner. I didn't know what to think. My mom had lied to me about my past, about my own identity. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. As I drove back home that evening, the letter sat on the passenger seat beside me, fluttering slightly with the car's movement. My phone buzzed twice, my mom calling. I didn't answer. I needed time to think. That night, I searched online for Henry Collins. Nothing. No website, no address, nothing current. The only mention I found was an old business listing from 15 years ago in a small town called Riverside, about an hour away. The next morning, I drove there. The building where his office used to be was abandoned. Dusty windows, broken blinds, a faded sign still hanging. But something strange happened when I walked around back.
A woman stepped out of a nearby antique store and called out, "Are you looking for Henry?" I turned, startled. She was old, maybe in her 70s, with kind but wary eyes. I told her yes, that I was trying to find him. She frowned and said, "Henry passed away years ago, But if you're connected to Richard Brooks, I think I have something you'll want to see. My chest tightened. How do you know my father? I asked. She hesitated for a long time before replying. He used to come here a lot. He was trying to find someone. A boy. Then she disappeared inside her store, motioning for me to follow. Behind the counter, she pulled out an old cardboard box labeled Brooks Family. This was left for someone named Ethan, she said softly. He told me one day a young man would come asking questions. I stared at her, speechless. My father had planned for this. Even this moment. I opened the box slowly. Inside were more letters, photos, and a folded hospital discharge paper. My heart sank as I read the name Margaret Brooks under Mother. But the father line was left blank. The old woman, her name was Martha, watched me closely. Henry told me that your father believes something terrible happened after your birth. He said there were arrangements made. Arrangements? I repeated. My voice cracked slightly. She hesitated. He didn't go into details, but your father thought someone took your firstborn and replaced him. For a moment, the room felt like it tilted. My stomach churned. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Replaced? Martha nodded slowly. She said your mother gave you a different name and raised you as her second child, but your father never found proof before he died. He was desperate to tell you, though. That's why he kept those letters. I stared at the documents again, trying to make sense of it all. My own identity, my memories, my entire life suddenly felt borrowed. If I was Michael, then who was Ethan? I took a deep breath and asked Martha if there was anything else Henry had left behind. She thought for a moment and then went into the back room. When she returned, she handed me a small black cassette tape. He said this was the last message your father ever recorded. I didn't say a word. I just thanked her, took the tape, and left. Back in my car, I sat for a long time before starting the engine. The tape felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of years of silence. That night, I dug my old tape recorder out of a storage box in my basement. The moment I pressed play, the room filled with the soft crackle of static, and then my father's voice. Ethan, or maybe I should say Michael. I froze. My heart began pounding so loud I could barely hear the next words. If you're listening to this, it means you've found the truth. I don't know how much you've learned, but your mother and I, we made mistakes. Big ones. There was a pause, just the faint sound of him taking a shaky breath. When you were a baby, your mother was struggling. I didn't understand it then, but she was under pressure, from her family, from debts, from shame. She told me you died at birth, but I never saw your body. And then, suddenly, she had another baby, you. She said it was fate, that we were given a second chance. His voice broke slightly. But I always knew something wasn't right. I found old hospital records, signatures that didn't match. I confronted her once, years later, and she admitted it, just enough for me to understand. She'd switched the names. You were our firstborn, Michael. She gave you a new identity so no one would question where the money went. Money? My hand shook as I listened. She took money from someone to keep quiet. I still don't know who. But that secret, it ruined her. It ruined everything. The tape clicked off suddenly. I sat there in the dark, completely numb. My father's voice echoed in my mind, over and over. She switched the names. I grabbed my phone and opened my mom's contact. For a long time, I just stared at her name. I wanted to call her, to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I drove. I didn't even realize where I was heading until I pulled up outside her house. It was almost midnight, the windows dim, the same house I'd grown up in, the same place filled with memories that now felt like lies. I rang the doorbell once. After a moment, the light in the hallway flicked on. Then I heard her footsteps. When she opened the door and saw me, she smiled, the same gentle, practiced smile I'd seen my whole life. "Ethan?" she said softly. "It's late. What's wrong?" I stared at her for a long time before answering. My voice came out low and cold. "Why did you lie to me?" Her smile faded instantly. "What are you talking about?" I took the letter out of my pocket, the one from Dad, and held it out. "You told him Michael died, but he didn't, did you?" She froze. Her eyes darted to the letter, then back to me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in them. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "From him," I said. "From Dad, and I know everything now." Her hands began to shake. She stepped back, as if she'd been hit by something invisible. And all she said was, "Ethan, please, you don't understand." But I did. And that was when I realized something. She wasn't afraid because I'd found the truth. She was afraid because I hadn't found all of it. "Ethan, please, you don't understand." Those words hung in the air like smoke, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. I took a step into the house, pushing past her before she could stop me. I said, "Then make me understand. Tell me why my father thought his firstborn was stolen. Tell me why I have two names. Tell me why you lied to me my entire life." She closed the door quietly, as if the world outside didn't deserve to hear what was about to be said. Her face looked older, smaller somehow, under the soft yellow light of the hallway. She walked toward the living room, her bare feet barely making a sound on the carpet. She stopped by the old wooden cabinet, the one she always kept locked. For the first time in my life, I saw her open it. Inside were stacks of letters, envelopes, a few black and white photos, and, to my shock, another cassette tape. "Your father wasn't wrong, but he didn't know the whole truth either." I folded my arms. "Start talking." She hesitated, then looked straight at me, her eyes red but steady. "You were born as Michael. That much is true. But the man who raised you, your father, wasn't supposed to be your father." I froze. "What do you mean, wasn't supposed to be?" She turned away, running her fingers over the dusty cabinet. "Before you were born, I made a mistake. I was young, desperate. I met someone, a man who wasn't your father. He promised me everything, security, money, a new life. But when I got pregnant, he disappeared." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "When your real father, Henry, found out, he was devastated. He said he'd raise you anyway, but he made me swear never to tell anyone who your biological father was. I agreed. We were going to move on, start fresh." She stopped, breathing heavily. "But Henry's family found out. They were powerful, and they didn't want their name tied to scandal. They said they'd take everything, the house, the business, unless I fixed it, unless I made it go away." I felt my stomach twist. "So you made it go away by lying?" She looked at me, tears now streaming down her face. "I did what I had to do. I told everyone the baby, you, had died. I took the money they offered to stay quiet, and then I came back months later, pregnant again, with your brother." My voice cracked. "My brother?" She nodded slowly. "Ethan. The real Ethan." My head spun. "But I am Ethan." She stepped closer, shaking her head. "No, you were Michael. I changed your name after the real Ethan, after he—" She stopped herself, covering her mouth. I stepped forward. "After he what?" Her voice was barely a whisper. After he died, everything inside me went still. He was only a year old, she said, sobbing now. It was an accident, a stupid, terrible accident. I couldn't live with it. Henry was shattered. He blamed me. He said God was punishing us. And then I remembered you. You were living with your father's relatives. No one knew the truth but me. So I went back. I begged them to let me see you. They refused. I took you. I stared at her, unable to breathe. You kidnapped me. She nodded once, weakly. I didn't think of it like that then. I thought I was saving myself, saving us. I renamed you Ethan, destroyed the papers, and told Henry we'd been given another chance. I sat down slowly, my knees shaking. Every word she said cracked something inside me. So all those years, you let me live a lie. You let me grow up thinking I was someone else, while another family lost their child. She didn't answer. Just stared at the floor, her shoulders trembling. Finally, she said, I knew it would come out one day. Your father started digging before he died. He left those letters for you because he wanted you to know who you were. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. And my real father? The man you left, what happened to him? She hesitated. He found out what I did. He tried to contact me years later, but I couldn't face him. The money he gave me, it ruined everything. He wanted to make things right, but I was too far gone. I stood, feeling both furious and hollow. You didn't just ruin everything, I said quietly. You erased me. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Ethan, don't, I snapped. You don't even know my name anymore. There was silence, just the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. I looked at her one last time. She looked so small, so broken, clutching that cassette like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Then I turned and walked out the door. Outside, the night was cold, the air sharp against my skin. I stood in the driveway for a long time, staring at the house that had been my whole world, a world built on lies. The cassette was still in my hand. I looked down at it, my thumb brushing over the label. In faded ink, one word was written: truth. I didn't play it that night. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But as I stood there under the streetlight, one thought wouldn't leave me. If my entire life had been built on someone else's mistake, then who was I, really? The answer wasn't in that tape. It wasn't in her letters. It wasn't even in her guilt. It was somewhere out there, waiting for me to find it.